We are going to turn now to Yemen. You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 594. This is the second part of the Resistance Report in which I will focus on Yemen. If we take a look at the first map, it's been 2 weeks since the since the American operation abruptly ended. The war on Yemen abruptly ended, and we have seen the Yemeni forces Yemeni armed forces increase their attacks against Israel since the United States has left this war. 18 ballistic missile and drone attacks in the past 2 weeks targeting Ben Gurion Airport as part of the aerial blockade that the Yemeni armed forces are trying to impose on the Israeli economy in solidarity with Gaza, including one missile attack today. If we look at the next one, it's this missile ranges, and this is going to be relevant for this resistance report on Yemen, because you can see the bands cover beyond. They go all the way to Beirut, and the reason why I want to show that this time is because, as I will point out later in the show, the Yemenis are expanding their targeting of Israel to include the Mediterranean port of Haifa. So the missile range is relevant this week. As we see in this next slide, this is from the Yemeni Armed Forces announcement about the blockade of the Haifa port. It says, in response to the Israeli enemy's brutal escalation against our brothers and their families in Gaza, committing dozens of massacres each day, and in response to the continuing siege and starvation, the enemy's refusal to halt its aggression and to lift the blockade, the Yemeni armed forces have decided to carry out the leadership's directives and begin enforcing a naval blockade on Haifa port. Accordingly, we will notify all companies whose vessels are currently in that port or bound for that port. For the moment that this statement is issued, Haifa port has entered our bank of targets, and they must treat what is stated here and in any future notices with the utmost seriousness. The decision follows our successful blockade of the Eilat port, which has long since ceased operations. So the Haifa port now follows the aerial blockade that the Yemenis put on, and we haven't reported on Yemen in the last 2 weeks, so I wanted to bring you this video. The next one, number 23 here, shows the Yemeni aerial blockade video that was released for the Israelis to see. The Yemeni armed forces announced the aerial blockade of Israel earlier this month, in the days after the U.S. announced that they were stopping their attacks on Yemen in early May. This has a voiceover of Brigadier General Yahya Saree, the spokesperson, and says, in response to Israeli aggression in response to the Israeli escalation by the decision to expand the massive ground operation in Gaza, the Yemeni armed forces announced that we will work to impose a complete aerial blockade of the Israeli enemy. The decision to ban air navigation to the airports of occupied Palestine, as well as to ban the passage of Israeli ships in the Red and Arabian Seas, and in addition to the support operations, will continue until the aggression on Gaza stops and the siege is lifted. In that video, you saw Israel's 3 international airports, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Eilat. That's Ramon Airport in the south of Israel. So in this next scene, you can see the evacuation notices. These are evacuation notices that the Yemenis are issuing in the same way the Israelis do it. This evacuation notice went along with a statement from the Yemeni armed forces that said, the evacuation warning has been issued to Ben Gurion Airport. In the coming hours, the Yemeni armed forces will bomb Ben Gurion Airport and other Israeli airports due to the recent escalation against Gaza and the aggression against Yemen, because Israel attacked Yemen this past week for the 8th time since the war began, and destroyed the Sana'a airport. Israel said that the Sana'a airport would be out of order for months. It was out of order for less than 10 days. The Yemenis rebuilt, and planes have been landing there after 10 days of it being destroyed, and they have been for a number of days since then. The warning says that all remaining airlines and those present at the airport, especially foreigners, are requested to leave immediately for their own safety. And they have backed this up, as we can see in this next slide. These Yemeni missile strikes have been a daily occurrence for Israel, sending off sirens that have 2+ million people running to shelters. And they have been doing this with supreme confidence. When Trump was in Saudi Arabia last week, the Yemenis fired 2 ballistic missiles over his head when he was speaking in Saudi Arabia as part of their daily attacks, virtually daily, sometimes twice in a day, attacks against Israel. And late last week, we saw one of these attacks where 4 interceptors were fired at a single ballistic missile. So those are Arrow 3 interceptors. That's more than $10 million in interceptors that we hadn't seen the interceptors launched in quite that way. So we know that they're using tens of millions of dollars for every strike. We also know that the THAAD system that the United States moved into Israel to protect Israel, that they're launching $12 to $15 million for a single interceptor. And last week, the THAAD missile system launched multiple missiles and missed with both of them on 2 separate occasions. So tens of millions of dollars and each instance being burned on these Yemeni strikes. And as I said, Israel attacked Sana'a airport and it was quickly rebuilt. Number 26 here shows you the USS Truman. This is the aircraft carrier strike group that was attacking Yemen. The Yemeni forces targeted these carrier groups, according to 𝐓𝐡𝐿 𝐿, including the USS Truman and its warships, and the USS Vinson, who came recently with more than 131 operations, including 253 anti-ship ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, and drones, according to Abdelmalek al-Houthi in his speech on Thursday. And the Admiral James Kilby, who is the acting chief of U.S. naval operations, said that the Truman conducted 670 airstrikes from its planes on shore in Yemen, and they intercepted 160 enemy, in this case, Yemeni drones and missiles during its 5 months it spent in the Red Sea. The New York Times recently reported on this operation based on Pentagon officials that they spoke to, that said that they had burned through more than $1 billion in armaments protecting the carriers and their warships in the first 30 days alone of the 52-day operation, suggesting they spent more than $1.5 billion on vertical launch missiles to protect the aircraft carrier strike group from Yemeni drones and missiles. That's, of course, on top of the 8 MQ-9 Reaper drones that were lost just in that window of time. We know that more than 24 have been lost since 2017, but in that window of time of the American operation, 8 MQ-9 Reaper drones were downed, 30 million apiece, plus we know about the 2 FA-18 Super Hornets that were lost, $70 million jets that were lost overboard while the ship, the USS Truman aircraft carrier, was carrying out evasive maneuvers to get out of the way of Yemeni drones and missiles. And that was the 3rd F-18 that was lost on the Truman's deployment that time. So after Trump said that they were not going to after Trump said to the Navy to stand down, they really did. They basically turned heel and headed home. And like I reported over the past number of weeks, the Truman was supposed to head home anyway. So they were going to be limping home with 3 less jets and $1.5 billion of vertical launch missile defense capabilities expended. But this is here the confirmation from the Sentinel-2 satellite of the USS Truman and its escort vessels on its way out through the Suez Canal, through the north and into the Mediterranean, which you can see in this next slide. In the Mediterranean, The Central Command, I mean, the president of the United States promised to annihilate completely, that is a quote unquote, Ansar Allah. Clearly, that did not happen in any way, shape, or form. CENTCOM said that they carried out strikes on 11,000 plus targets. Abdul Malik al-Houthi said that there was 1,712 U.S. strikes in total. CENTCOM says targets, so sometimes targets are hit with multiple strikes. That accounts for the difference in the two numbers. And like I said, they lost all of their hardware. And that is the carrier strike group steaming through the Mediterranean on its way back home to the United States. And we could see in this next slide the U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers, which was half of the B-2 bomber fleet that was sent to Diego Garcia to also bomb Yemen. That is them arriving back in Missouri in the United States. That happened earlier this week. So all the B-2 bombers are gone from the American operation. And as Israel pointed out this week, they're on their own to fight the Yemeni threat on their own. The Americans are out of this battle as of now. So that is the resistance report on Yemen for day 594.